Welcome to the Sherdog Radio Network live recap for UFC on ABC 5, Emmett versus Topuria, also known as UFC Jacksonville. Don't adjust your screens. It is not the Shillen and Duffy show tonight. It is instead the Duffy and Duffy show tonight, as the junior Duffy, Mr. Adam right here, is physically in town. So despite that orange line between the two of us, we are in fact in the same room, as we'll demonstrate. Adam?
Shit.
So, UFC Jacksonville. We just finished the main event. Josh Emmett, Ilya Topuria. Topuria came in heavily favored. Keith and I both picked Topuria by finish. I picked Topuria by finish in the middle rounds. I felt pretty good about my pick there for a while, but he does make it to decision, and we have some outlandishly lopsided scorecards.
Mm-hmm.
So, official scorecards are 49-45 in favor of Topuria, a 50-44 in favor of Topuria, and a 50-42 for the German-born Georgian by way of Spain. If you're listening right now, first of all, thanks for joining us. We always have fun with these. This is going to be a bit of a matinee, as it is 5 p.m. here in the Central Time Zone. Let us know what you scored this fight. Myself, I scored at 49-45. I gave the first round to Emmett. Just, Topuria didn't throw a single strike for the first 2 minutes. I thought he got slightly the better of things once he did open up, but neither of them really hurt the other.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that looks like an Emmett round to me. I did give a 10-8 round. I guess that would have been round 4. Yeah. So I got 49-45. If you gave Topuria round 1, then you're looking at that 50-44, same as one of the official judges.
Yep.
The 50-42 is the one we're going to be talking about for a while. Adam, did you score this live as we were watching it?
Yes, I did. And I essentially agree with you in the sense that the only round that was pretty competitive, I would say, is the first round. Neither fighter really did a lot of damage to each other, but Emmett was the far busier one, as Topuria sort of got as much data as he could in that round. It seemed just sort of weathered the storm initially, and then sort of got his timing on to pour on the later rounds. And then every round I scored anywhere from 10-9 to 10-8. But I'm looking right now at MMA decisions, and I'm looking at Chris Lee's scorecard, who was the one who scored 50-42, and I see that he gave a 10-7 in the 4th round, which that's not something you see often, a 10-7.
No, it is something you shouldn't see very often.
Yeah.
Again, I feel like I'm a broken record saying this, and I swear I'm not trying to clout chase, but about a year ago, last July, I went ahead and took the Association of Boxing Commission's referee and judge training course. I went, took the road trip, took the actual course that aspiring and actually certified refs and judges take, alongside some well-known judges. And one of the things we talked about was 10-9 versus 10-8 rounds. And the basic guideline is that 10-8 rounds should be the most lopsided 5% of rounds. Like 1 round in 20, whichever is the most, lopsided, should be a 10-8 round. And obviously, they're not saying, okay, every 20 rounds that you score, you have to give it 10-8. But just in general, if you're looking at your scores over the course of a month or a year, it should average out to about the worst 5%. If it's not that much, then you need to give out 10-8s more liberally. If it's more than that, then you need to tighten it up. And someone asked, well, what about 10-7s? He's like, and it was Kevin McDonald teaching our course. And he just said, you probably shouldn't. If it was a 10-7 round, it probably should have been stopped.
Yeah, I've heard in the past before that 10-8s and to an extent 10-7s are almost the judge's way of sort of rectifying what they thought should happen in the octagon. If they think the referee should have stopped it, they're going to sort of correct that on the back end by giving it such a huge point advantage to the winning fighter. And I mean, yeah. I mean, it was definitely a 10-8 round, I believe. I mean, towards the end there, Emmett was looking, really, really terrible. But I just still don't know exactly what criteria left Chris Lee to think 10-7 was the correct scoring. I mean,
I try not to go in hard on the judges. They have a thankless job, a literally thankless job.
Yeah.
When they do it right. Nobody remembers their names. Nobody thanks them. And whenever any of them screw up, the shame laser just kind of homes in on them.
Yeah.
Having said that, Chris Lee really has become a menace in the last year or two. He's he's one of the UFC's regulars. He's one that is on the road when the UFC is, outside of its usual Las Vegas stomping grounds. He goes overseas with the UFC, and kind of like Sal D'Amato was for years. I don't understand why he's the guy that they choose to bring with them.
Yeah.
Because he will give out outlandishly bad scorecards that, even if he has quirky or idiosyncratic internal scoring criteria, he should just know aren't normal.
Yeah.
Like, you should be able to ask Chris Lee, dude, you've been doing this for over a decade. You've done thousands of rounds. How many 10-7s have you seen? Like, what are you doing?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, in your memory, as watching fights for as long as you have you ever seen a 10-7 round scored in the UFC? That was like
only in like the 2000 aughts, like, but before they started giving out more guidelines, because we've had guidelines in the past 10 years. Okay, let's do fewer 10-8 rounds. Let's do more 10-8 rounds. But I remember things like Tito Ortiz just beating the shit out of Elvis Sinisek in 2003 or whatever it was, and there were some 10-7 rounds, and they were well deserved.
Yeah.
At least by the standards of the time, and that fight maybe should have been stopped. But no, like, I haven't seen any. The last round I could consider, giving a 10-7 to would have been the first round of Shane Carwin versus Brock Lesnar. But that fight should have been stopped like 3 times that round.
Yeah.
So that was a 10-7 because
So I guess considering that, if Chris Lee's making this decision that he thinks that, I mean, to an extent in this 10-8 round he scored, but also to a greater extent in the 10-7 round he scored, he thinks that should have been stopped at some point in the fourth round, at least in the aggregate. And
that's not his job.
It's
not. I don't mean to bring a politically charged word into here, but don't be an activist judge. You're not the ref. Just score the fucking round.
But do you think that there was ever a time where it could have been stopped for Emmett, and Topuria could have gotten a TKO?
And that's the other problem, because it was such a methodical accumulation of damage. There weren't any real big.
Yeah, it was it's over. Like, a jumpy ref could jump in and pull him off.
There's no, like, if Joe Rogan had been on the stick tonight, there's no moment. It's almost over. It was a beatdown. It was a beatdown. It will certainly end up on Sherdog's list of candidates for beatdown of the year for 2023. But relatively few pivotal moments. Yeah. It was just like they threw Emmett into like a barrel full of rusty nails and rolled him downhill, and the barrel started going faster and faster, but there was never a moment where it like hit a tree and pieces of Emmett went flying everywhere. It was just a methodical, predictable, and frankly kind of sad mauling. It was a mauling. Anything surprised you out of this?
Surprising? No, not necessarily. I think the biggest thing here with Topuria getting put in his first main event against a top 5 opponent, it was about answering questions related to Topuria that we'd had up until this point. He'd beaten some really good guys in really impressive fashion, like the Bryce Mitchells, and before that the Jai Herberts and Ryan Hall. But this was about seeing, like, well, how does he look in the last 2 rounds of a 5-round fight? How does he look against someone as powerful and as solid as Emmett, even though he might be kind of get up there in years? And I think we might have mentioned this a little bit while we were watching the fight, but in the first 3 rounds, it seemed like Topuria was cool as a cucumber. Even though he had been putting it on Emmett, Emmett had really been sort of desperately trying to take his head off. He was composed the entire time, and going into those last 2 rounds, it was interesting to see how he would get out of gear and see if he would really pick it up. The entire time though, he stayed composed. He stayed like grounded to himself, and he just picked apart Emmett. We were talking, I think, in the 4th or 3rd round, how after rocking Emmett and he's on his way up, he starts hammering at his body with body shots, and then when he stands up, when Emmett's waiting for either a body shot or something up top to come in, he just kicks him in his leg as hard as he can. Like the mixing it up of like delivering pain to the leg, the body, and the head, and then just like repeating. It never let Emmett get comfortable. It was, and that's part of like the sort of sad beatdown we were talking about, where it just seems like he was in pain the entire time. Emmett's the left side of Emmett's face was looking like very gnarly towards the end of that fight, from all the damage that Topuria was giving on his right. But nothing really surprised me.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would say might have surprised me is how little effort there was by either guy to bring the fight to the ground. Because I would have thought that each guy secretly thought that he had an advantage there.
Yeah.
And just nobody ever went there until pretty pretty late on.
Yeah.
You pointed out that Topuria was extremely composed, and Emmett was almost the opposite. Like, he wasn't out there just spazzing out, but over swinging on everything. Like, over swinging so hard that he kept slipping and was so far out over his lead leg that, well, one, he was off balance. Those haymakers overwhelmingly did not land, but also that front plant foot with all of his weight and then some on it was getting hacked at. You can't check a kick if all of your weight is jammed onto that foot and you're out here swinging your overhand. Yeah, it was. And this is oversimplifying, and it shortchanges Emmett to say this, but it felt like a 2006 wrestle boxer fighting a 2023 wrestle boxer. Because both guys, broadly speaking, have a lot of the same skills. They're both short, compact guys with excellent offensive wrestling and, really, really good one-shot power. But Emmett had the Josh Koscheck, early Tyron Woodley thing where he's just super heavy on his front foot, swinging real hard on everything, and sometimes will forget to do the level change feints and the actual takedown attempts that opened that up for him.
Yeah.
Whereas Topuria, just everything buttoned down, weight over his feet, never overextending. And I mean, he didn't use his offensive wrestling very much, but just could have at any moment. Like, just much, much more poised.
Yeah. He didn't use it until the very end, which seemed like a thing of, it's in the 5th round, let's stay on top of things while Josh Emmett, Josh Emmett's going to do everything he can to steal it away from you. And he got him to the ground pretty easily. And so it's interesting to think about if he had gone to that earlier, if that would have, even been another aspect where Topuria would have maybe dominated in that fight is on the ground. And like you were just saying about the damn, I was just about to mention about it was Topuria and Emmett with Emmett's like composure on the feet and his like overswinging and stuff like that. Topuria had a very like methodical cycle when it came to being on the feet. He used his jab to just keep like the range and keep the distance. He was constantly
and strip half the skin off of his face.
Exactly. I could just feel like underneath that eye how every time the glove slipped past, it would off the left side of his face, it would just cause more and more damage. And then every time Emmett would come in with that like plant on his lead foot overhand right to where he would slip it going with like a left or a right and would just hop back on his jab. It was
and Topuria's jab was a revelation for me in this fight. I mean, I've always thought he was a solid boxer with all the tools, but this is a cliche I've brought up a few times before. There are people in MMA for whom the jab is a tool. It's a tool for finding rhythm, disrupting rhythm, finding range. And then there are fighters for whom the jab is a weapon. It cuts people. It stops them in their tracks. It can knock them down at the right moment.
Like an Usman.
Kamaru Usman is a prime example. Rob Font is a great example. Max Holloway is a great example. But all the guys that are like that are people who are long and rangy, even if they're not the tallest. Like Usman isn't the tallest welterweight, but just has ridiculously long reach. And then, of course, people like Holloway and Font are tall. This was some of the best short man jabbing I've seen. And part of that may just be the natural progression of Topuria's skills. He's still in his mid-20s. Part of it may be him specifically preparing a game plan for one of the few times he's going to fight a fighter who's shorter and fights shorter than him. But brilliant work with the jab tonight. Just nasty stuff. Emmett, even as a hardened fan of this sport, was a little hard to look at by the end of the fight. Just that whole left side of his face, the ear, like obviously having a hematoma inside where the cauliflower ear had filled with blood. The hanging like skin from the I don't know if anybody who's watching has watched the new show House of the Dragon, but you'll know that the king at the end, the left side of his face just like rots away, and I feel like that's just like what Emmett would have progressed to if that fight had kept going. Just one side of his face completely just hollowed in. I mean, if this is a 7-round fight, the cut man is just dumping a bucket of molten gold over his head before the final round.
Like, this will get you going. Cut man Tate is just rubbing. Ooh. Oh my god, it was really crazy. And with that jab and being able and sort of utilizing that against an opponent who's got similar dimensions to him, which he hasn't had in a while. He's fought a lot of guys who when he fought Jai Herbert at lightweight, Jai was that's how I say his name, right? Yeah, okay, just making sure. A lot longer than him, just a lot had the distance. That caused a lot of problems, which I was interested to see because, in that fight, Herbert hit him pretty cleanly. I think with a head kick, which kind of caused some issues for Topuria, and he was obviously losing up until the knockout. And so I was interested to see with a power puncher like Emmett if how he'd be able to stand against that. But it bodes well for Topuria, seeing as how above him in the rankings at this point there are. I mean, besides like maybe the Max Holloways and the Yairs, who are sort of longer and a little rangier. People like Allen, people like Volk are similar to closer to his size, especially like the Volk fight or the Volk matchup. It's a very interesting one, and at least in terms of his ability to get that jab off on a similarly sized guy.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to be at least a little smaller than most of the contenders from here on out, but Volkanovski is built almost exactly like Emmett.
Yeah.
Movsar Evloev is probably smaller than Topuria in every dimension because he's not as thickly built either.
Yeah.
So if he's developing a set of skills that are going to allow him to fight to his best advantage against opponents with several different body types, that's going to be a smart move for him. Just real quick, we've been here for about 15-20 minutes. If you've checked in since we started, thanks for checking us out. This is usually the Shillen and Duffy live recap. Tonight is the Duffy and Duffy live recap. I am Sherdog senior editor Ben Duffy. I am usually accompanied by Keith Shillen, the executive producer of the Sherdog Radio Network. He is on vacation this week. And speaking of vacation, in town for vacation is Adam Duffy, the editor-in-chief of the Georgia State University Sentinel and MMA fan and occasional fill-in on these shows. So I just had him hang out and talk about these fights with us. I see we have a bunch of our usuals in the chat. Dev, newest member of the Sherdog Radio Network, the artist formerly known as RC Kim, now RM Kim, Moneyliner, always good to have you hang out with us. John Butterfield was here briefly. John Butterfield, you're in the UK. If we're doing an early card like this, it's out of consideration for you. So, be here, be present with us. I saw West Coast, and West Coast brought up something I wanted to move on to next. Here he is. I assume he means Topuria here, still has no chance against Volk. Give him one more fight, Ortega. There's a lot to unpack here in 12 words.
Yeah.
I don't know if he has no chance against Volk. I mean, obviously, everybody has a chance. I will say he doesn't have a great chance against Volk, but that's just because if you tell me that Alexander Volkanovski is the best fighter on the planet right now, I might not agree with you, but I'd understand and I wouldn't laugh at you. Nobody has much of a chance against him. Give him one more fight. That's the real question.
Mm-hmm.
What are you doing with Ilia Topuria off the most impressive win of his career?
I think that in a division that Volkanovski's obviously really dominated over, and he's had all these fights with Max that have sort of put him in a similar position to like Brandon Moreno or Adesanya. Just you're really starving for parity there, like new challenges, new opportunities, which is why Yair Rodriguez is such an interesting prospect. It's such an interesting fight, is because it's the first person he's fought that's not Max Holloway or sort of a very outmatched TKZ. And so that makes it very interesting. And I know that's definitely there with Topuria, undefeated, just put on a great fight against Josh Emmett, but I wouldn't personally be hasty to put him in a title shot, put him against the winner of Rodriguez versus Volkanovski. I think that good thing John Butterfield's still here. We're only getting one. We only get like one of these like UK or like European timed cards per year. So you got to appreciate it while you can. But like I was saying, I don't think I'd put him in there against the winner of Yair versus Volk. I think that he would be great to match up against someone else in the top 5. And my biggest thing, and I see a few people in the chat putting it down, I think him versus Allen would be a great fight.
Arnold Allen versus Ilia Topuria dude.
The two, maybe like two of the most well-rounded guys below Volk.
Well-rounded guys. Ilia, really all the skills and all the physical tools, except, you wouldn't mind him being a little bigger for that division. But aside from that, an incredible athlete. Allen, not the most gifted athlete, but incredibly well-rounded and one of the smartest and best coached fighters in the game.
Yeah.
I love that fight. Ilia versus Allen. If anybody else likes that one, let us know.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Devin Tejada says, keep Ilia away from Max.
Keep Max away from everybody in the top 5 at featherweight.
I like it. he would approach it differently. You
Mhm.
take a different approach for Max Holloway than you do for Josh Emmett. But if he tried that, if he goes out and jabs up Max Holloway for 5 rounds, I will have learned some things. The only way people have won striking battles with Max Holloway have either been with a heavy investment in leg kicks,
Mhm.
like Alexander Volkanovski, mixed with threats of the takedown, or just with superior power, like Dustin Poirier.
Yeah.
Aside from that, nobody's successfully stood and boxed with him,
No.
and the results have usually been ugly.
Yeah.
He made Calvin Kattar look like hamburger.
Yeah.
And Calvin Kattar is one of the best boxers in that division.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
I'd love to see it. John Butterfield brings up the pragmatic point. I wouldn't be eliminating contenders at this point. This is what I wanted to get around to.
Mhm.
Even if you believe he has no chance against Volkanovski, it isn't the UFC's matchmaker's job to breed a fighter in a lab to beat the champ.
Yeah.
It is just to keep a steady stream of plausibly deserving challengers going. Like,
Yeah.
I don't really think it's about trying to find who can beat the champ. Like, there are some dominant champs, and for a long time, maybe nobody beats them.
Mhm.
You know, like sometimes Lauren Murphy is the next best thing you've got up for Valentina Shevchenko.
Yep.
It's not about what kind of chance she had. It's Lauren Murphy has earned this, and Valentina Shevchenko, at the very least, has earned the right to defend her title
When she wants to.
against someone who's on some kind of win streak
Mhm.
in the division. So when it's time
Yeah.
for Topuria, it's time. I would say there's no need to rush him because he's young, because he's taking relatively little damage in most of his fights. Like, he got hit cleanly a couple times against Herbert.
Yeah, for sure.
He got cleanly knocked down twice. He was losing the fight, but to mention a fight again, it wasn't a Holloway Kattar thing where
complete
Topuria
outclass.
had taken 230 shots to the head. So there's no need to rush it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think personally for me, the biggest thing is that, you know, and this is one thing that undercuts the Rodriguez versus Volk matchup is the fact that you know, in a pretty competitive fight, pretty close fight, Max still beat Yair Rodriguez pretty well. And so, you know, when you're matching up a Rodriguez versus a Volk, it always comes in your mind with that thought that, well, like, he's still underneath Max Holloway, who is underneath Volk, which undermines like the some of the excitement around that matchup, because you just think in a 1-to-1 scenario that Volk should be a level above Rodriguez. And I think that I'm sort of manifesting this hope that after Max Holloway fights the Korean Zombie in Singapore, that, you know, he makes like a shift in his career, you know, moving up to 155. And I'm sort of manifesting that by trying to remove him from the equation in my own head, and just looking at the top 5 with like our new sort of with our new top 5 of Rodriguez, Allen, and Topuria now. You know, it interests me to see Topuria, who I think, you know, he looked, I think he's still getting better, like both like in his like physical prime. I think he's still getting better from fight to fight. And I think a matchup of him versus somebody else in the top 5, really, I mean, it could be anyone who will be sticking around the division. I think that will sort of, you know, liven up that title picture.
What do you do with Emmett? I'm in the Sherdog editorial Slack, just because if something comes up like Emmett announces he's retiring or announces he's moving up to 155 or something, they'll talk about it right away. I don't see any of that. So if you have to match Josh Emmett as soon as his face is better, I'd say 6 months from now in the featherweight division, what are you doing with him? You
know, I think that I'm also, I mean, I think it would have been a good one to go out on this fight. You know, it was very exciting. While he lost, you know, pretty, you know, badly, he still put up, he was, until the very end, he was putting up a hell of a fight. And so while I don't think, apparently he might not retire tonight, I think he's only on his last, you know, 1 or 2 fights. You know, he's 38 years old. He's been fighting in that division for a long time. That weight cut is miserable, as we've seen in the past for him. Looks like a goblin when he gets all like sucked in and stuff like that. I think I think you give him somebody you're trying to give a bounce back for, to sort of play off of that. I think you give him Brian Ortega on his comeback, because I think that's a good matchup for Ortega. I think that, you know, Emmett is on his way out, and I think if you're trying to make Brian Ortega sort of a live thing again in that division, I think you give him sort of a little bit of a toss up in Emmett.
What do you like? Would you object if they gave it someone like Bryce Mitchell?
Interesting. No, wouldn't at all. I mean, like I said, like same thing. It's like, that's a prospect you're trying to get off the ground because of how much people like him. And so, giving him a name like Emmett in a fight like Emmett is not a bad idea.
There's a lot of love for Emmett going on in the chat right here.
Yeah.
I could not agree more. Emmett knew going into that 5th round that he needed something huge in order to win.
Yeah.
And what's he do? He doesn't go out and try to taunt Topuria into doing something stupid. He just goes out, does his best to get within range, and throws his hardest punch as many times as he can before time runs out or he gets taken down. Think of how many fighters, when they are losing a fight and they know they're losing a fight, go in the direction of salvaging their own ego rather than trying to win the fight at any cost. Think of...
We saw that just a few weeks ago on the undercard of... I forget who it was, but it was an undefeated guy like in the 3rd round on his way down. Yeah, exactly.
I forget his name too. But we've seen it out of even well-known fighters. We've seen it out of your... it's a classic Diaz brother thing.
Yes.
Like on the 3rd or 5th round of a fight, I can't win. I start like laying on the ground like this,
putting
or throwing the middle fingers up. I mean, we've seen Jorge Masvidal do it.
Yeah.
We've seen Bobby Green do it.
Yeah.
Very much in fitting with Emmett's kind of low-key hard hat personality that he's like, okay, I need a knockout. I'm gonna go try to get a knockout.
Yeah.
So good stuff. RM Kim. I didn't think about it much tonight, and maybe should have, but I am all about any corner that cares enough about their fighter to throw the towel. Like, what more did we learn out of those last 2 rounds? Other than, okay, Topuria has enough gas to keep going in a fight where it's all one-way traffic. Yeah, Marcus Mustard. 10 points for Marcus Mustard. Blake Builder is the name that we were trying to think of.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I got you. Got you.
Blake Builder. I mean, considering that I know how Builder reacts when he's winning, we could have guessed. But Blake Builder. Good one, Marcus Mustard. Any other thoughts about this one before we move on to the rest of the card?
No. I mean, great main event. We were always it was this whole card was pretty main event top heavy, and so it definitely delivered. Great fight.
Yeah. Second from the top was a women's flyweight matchup between Macy Barber and Amanda Ribas. Pretty high stakes there. That's a wide open enough division that almost any woman is at most 4 wins away from a title shot. This was a revelation, man. I had Ribas in this one. I had her pretty comfortably. And it's not just that Barber won. It is that's about as good as I've seen her look, considering when she won, how she won, and against whom. Probably her best performance. Because it had enough of the things that reminded me of why she seemed special on the way up. Just the savagery and the killer instinct. Like, she has some of the meanest ground and pound of any woman in MMA. And then just looks like a much better striker. It was a reminder that the woman is still just 25 years old.
Yeah.
All right. John Butterfield asks a thought-provoking question. Was this the best non-title fight in recent women's history? Really enjoyed it. I'm up there with you. I can only hope that the upcoming Rose Namajunas Manon Fior fight lives up to it.
Yeah.
And RM Kim just killing me with Macy the Suture Barber.
Yeah.
He's also the one that called Dominic the Denominator Cruz for getting some basic math wrong last week. So RM Kim, I really do consider him my unpaid intern.
Yeah.
Just
comes in here just to liven up the chat a little bit. That's a really good one.
No, because Barber's problem was from the time she was 19 and coming up in LFA and then Invicta until about 2 years ago, she didn't get any better. Like, she was still the same aggressive, hard-hitting ground and pounder with kind of rudimentary striking, and just none of it seemed to be getting better despite moving camps, despite all the opportunities she had. But here, she just legitimately looked like a better striker. And I said on the preview, this is kind of the card of prospects or at least UFC fighters that I had written off prematurely. And even though I picked her to lose, I said she's a perfect example. Someone that it was easy to laugh her off a couple of years ago when she lost 2 in a row because she called herself the future.
Youngest champ.
The whole thing, I'm going to be the youngest champ. She had crazy eyes. It was easy to say, oh, well, hype train derailed.
Yeah.
Now she's 13-2. She's on a 5-fight win streak.
Yeah, tied for the most in the division.
After
Valentina's
and it's
lost.
against logically progressing competition, ending in someone in Hibas who's a very good fighter and a top 10 talent. Any general thoughts about the fight before we talk about what's next for her?
Yeah, I think that Macy Barber's journey has been interesting. To me, it looks like a plane that takes off from a runway. Its engine stalls, and right before it smashes into the pavement, she picks up just barely. And I think it's been good for her. I think losing that Modafferi and then that Grasso fight. I think that maybe if she hadn't gotten injured, she would have beat Modafferi. And then being so young, being undefeated, she might have gotten shot up even harder. And then I think at that point, probably would have lost an even worse thing. And so in terms of like losses that help a young fighter get better, I think the way it's happened and the way it's going shows that it was good for her. I think she looked really great against Hibas. I was rooting for my girl Hibas there, but no, Barber looked good. And yeah, there's a lot of interesting matchups there at 125 for her.
What would you do with Macy Barber next?
I think just talking about this like logical progression of competition. I definitely think that you can start looking for sort of the upper top 10. That sort of 6 to 10 range. I think somebody who's on a win streak also and is right next to her in the rankings is Jennifer Maia. Mm-hmm. Definitely a possibility. Besides that, maybe. Kaylin Shukagan is sort of on a downturn as these new 125ers that come up, and so maybe that'd be a good sort of benchmark to see if she can hang with the other 125ers who have shown that they can beat Shukagan, like that, Manon Fiorot and stuff like that.
All right, as long as they give me enough advance notice that I can ask for that week off.
I'm not saying they'd be entertaining.
No, I like the Maia fight. There's also a possibility that she could end up closer to the title picture right now than we think, because there are a lot of moving parts. Yeah. We're going to have Shevchenko Grasso 2 coming up. Mm-hmm. If Shevchenko wins, then everyone else is in a holding pattern because they're going to do an immediate rubber match.
Yes.
If Grasso wins again, then all of a sudden the Aaron Blanchfield Tyler Santos fight is a possible title eliminator, and everyone slides up one. Like maybe they just tell Barber, okay, you got a lot of cuts, you got a broken nose, sit tight, heal up, stay close to weight.
Yeah.
And we have you weigh in as an alternate, or maybe you get the phone call. Or if Shevchenko wins and we're getting that immediate, 3 match, then all of a sudden everyone else can chill out a little bit, and maybe you do Barber versus Maia, because she wouldn't. Mm-hmm. There's not going to be anyone new in that title picture until early next year anyway.
Yeah, got a lot of interesting moving parts with like those like the Santos Blanchfield matchup and the Fiorot and Nami Yunus matchup, which is coming up. And then interestingly, you never know, like say with Shevchenko or with what other some 125 has been talking about moving up to that now really wide open 135-pound division. So I do think that there's a pretty short line up to the title for Macy Barber.
Yeah, I agree. And you kind of reminded me of that, the Fior versus Nami Yunus fight. Mm-hmm. Nami Yunus, the way the UFC does things, former champs always have a shortcut. Yep. They can always cut the line to another title shot, whether in their own division or another division. If she beats Manon Fior and looks great, she might be the next one fighting for a title.
Yeah. 100%.
Just greatness and charisma are, 2 things that are in short supply in the women's divisions right now. They would not, they're not going to make Nami Yunus run the gauntlet of 125. If she beats Manon Fior in Paris, and you got Pat Barry saying, who's the best? Who's the best in French?
And Fior's ranked number 2 right now, and so seeing Nami Yunus right then and there. Especially if it works out with if Shevchenko's not in the title picture, then I think Nami Yunus might be the closest woman to the title right now.
West Coast says no trilogy. you're preaching to the choir here, dude. I
That's how it
am
works.
as big an opponent of immediate title rematches as you'll find. I think immediate title rematches should only ever happen if there was some sort of controversy. Like if there was a freakish cut, if there was a blown call, then yeah, you run it back. But otherwise, I don't care if it's the most dominant champ getting upset out of nowhere. Still, make him go back and beat someone else. Build expectation for the rematch. Give them more time to go back to the drawing board and fix whatever cost them the first fight. So I'm with you, man. I'd rather have no trilogy, but I'm just bowing to the reality of what we're going to get.
We just follow the rules, guys.
Before that main event, the third fight down from the top, your feature fight, the unranked heavyweight slobber knocker. It ended as painlessly as possible for everyone involved except Justin Tafa. The replays were just gruesome. 29 seconds in, we get a collision where Lane, and dude, Lane's got some mitts. He's a 6'6" guy that used to play football and looks like he used to play basketball. I mean, he looks like an NBA small forward. Just collided with Tafa. His two middle fingers went straight into Tafa's eye sockets, right up to about the knuckle 2.5. Like, really? One thumb to the mouth, and he's got Justin Tafa like a bowling ball. One of the nastier eye pokes that you're likely to see, because he got the double at the same time. The classic Three Stooges, just, like, zoink. Tafa clearly needs to go to a new camp where he learns the defense. And is there anything worth saying about this?
You know, we got 30 seconds of that like of that quick burst energetic heavyweights where you think like, oh, hopefully one of them gets knocked out in the first 3 minutes. And then, you know, that taking that into a quick, you know, wrapping it up onto the next fight. Painless. You know, I feel bad for Tafa. But besides that, I can't complain as a viewer and as a yeah.
No, like John Jones going to be showing up at Austin Lane's doorstep just saying, show me your ways, master. Before that,
if it was John Jones, he would have gone away with it.
David Onama against Gabriel Santos in a featherweight matchup. Keith and I have both been pretty high on Onama ever since he got to the UFC. We said it was probably too soon as he stepped in on short notice, up a weight class, but said that he did belong. And in the ongoing watch of what happens to Glory MMA guys in their next fight or two after the disintegration of Glory, Onama going to Factory X Muay Thai is about as perfect a fit as you can get, just in terms of having a wealth of sparring partners within his general weight range to work with. I mean, they probably have 20 fighters between 135 and 155 pounds that are at least at kind of like the LFA level right now. That's a lot of bodies. I like the altitude thing. Training at about 5,000 feet doesn't hurt. But Onama looked good, not perfect. I mean, he lost the first round. And he lost the first round kind of having a tough time getting off against a much smaller fighter in Santos. But that finish in the second round. I mean, describe to me what you saw. Like it's two lefts, right? He hits him with a left.
He starts going down.
Always impressive when a fighter can hit a moving target that's moving vertically. Like, you know, you'll see plenty of people like double up a jab and hit a guy as he's like slipping one way or the other. But to hit a guy, drop him, and then just nail him again on the way down in that 1 second you have, beautiful stuff. Onama just in the zone. I mean, the only thing he could have done better was come up with his own celebration afterwards. He did the
Alex Pereira,
the Israel Adesanya, like
I guess
pull the arrows, like come on, man, like, come up with your own touchdown dance.
You know, originality might not be a strong suit, but hitting a moving target is. It's one of those finishes that like us in the moment. I mean, you caught it, but I didn't really like. He got that sort of like that short sort of left hand kind of an uppercut, then hit him twice on the way down, and it was one of the things I had to wait till the replay happened to see exactly what went on. Like you said, you know, the first round was a little worrisome, him not able to sort of get over on Santos on the ground, even though he had a pretty good size advantage, but still showing he has a lot of power in his hands, being able to just plunk him with that nice clean shot. Great fight from Onama. You know, might show up later in the show.
I would say. Sean Butterfield saying Onama versus Hakeem Dawodu. I mean,
Ooh.
I wasn't going to match make this because really in the 145-pound division, unless you've won like 6 fights in a row, the correct answer is just anyone else who won their last fight. But I like that.
Yeah,
because
that's not bad.
Dawodu is a guy that certainly can match Onama in terms of just quick strike, fast twitch, kickboxing ability, but is also underratedly good as an offensive wrestler. He's still not a good defensive wrestler, and can often throw too little volume for his own good. So it would be interesting to see if Onama could get more of a firefight out of him. Be interesting to see what would happen if Dawodu tried a couple takedowns early, just to give a man something to think about. Yeah,
hell of a fight.
It'd be great, because we'd have Dricus du Plessis on Twitter saying that neither of them is really African.
Oh man.
Before that, on the UFC Jacksonville main card, Brendan Allen and Bruno Silva, 2 middleweights looking for redemption. One of them found it as Brendan Allen, another just front and center of my whole theme of people I wrote off prematurely coming into this card. And with Allen, it was very much the same thing. He had 2 bad losses that in hindsight, it's not as though they were unforgivable. Sean Strickland went on to do good things. Chris Curtis has caught a lot of people with his shocking power, but Allen here against Silva looked really, really good. And obviously a first round finish, you don't want to nitpick too much at it, but I'm almost glad that he got hit cleanly by Silva a couple of times, because one of the problems coming into this fight was, is he just going to fold like he did against Curtis the next time someone hits him hard? Whatever other wheels may have fallen off of Bruno Silva's wagon, which I'll get to in a minute. At the very least, dude can still crack. He cracked Allen. Allen was fine, hit him back harder, and then did what Brendan Allen does, which is pounce on a fallen opponent and move shockingly fast on the ground to, and here he poured on some ground strikes as well, but gets to the back, is already slapping on the choke before getting his hooks in, which I'm sure took Silva by surprise. Because what's coming if a grappler gets on your back, and normally you're thinking like, okay, first the hooks, but no, Silva, it was first the neck, and then his hands go shooting up here, and then the hooks go in.
Pretty
Allen
intelligent.
just playing 3D chess on a man. So great showing by Brendan Allen. He's still just 25, 26 years old, which at 185, he may be 5 full years even from his prime. And he may be 10 years from like really the tail end of his effective lifespan as middleweight. Silva, that stock is plummeting, man. I hesitate to make accusations. I do. It's I'm not very responsible journalism wise most of the time. Like this dude's a much more serious journalist than I am, but I understand that like my words can do damage because they're amplified by my platform. Having said that, to go back and find a fighter who had a more obvious decline in terms of the eyeball test physically and in terms of physical performance, just their gas tank, their explosion, their strength, after signing with the UFC or after the advent of USADA, than Bruno Silva, I think you have to go all the way back to like Johnny Hendricks in 2013 or 2014 or whatever that was, where he went from a super plus athlete to being incapable of making weight and looking doughy just in the space of 8 or 10 months. That's kind of what's happened to Silva. And it is alarming. And if it's not that he was on some kind of juice before and just, isn't able to cycle like he used to, or he got something else going on and he just needs to, I don't know, like check his blood sugar and check it off. And I don't know, but he is a ghost of the guy that came into the UFC and just dusted 3 dudes in a row.
Dusted 3 dudes in a row, and then survived a fairly competitive fight with Alex Pereira, like all contested on the feet, which was almost a feat for Silva in the fact that he was able to at least do to Alex Pereira survive the whole fight, which
he did better against Pereira than I would have expected.
But then to go 2-1 in his last 3 with GM3 choking him out, and
GM3 not just choking him out but outstriking him from the beginning.
Yes
Like, yeah, like if
over like 2 rounds, just
if
like
you went from being Bruno Silva to being slower than GM3 in the first round of a fight, like, yeah,
something. It definitely points to something. And he was coming off a pretty good, at least like a little bit of a good feat in knocking out Brad Tavares, a notoriously tough guy, which just shows that he's still like, if anything, his power is still definitely there. And it was pretty good to see Allen survive that power and still move through it, because we always knew that, if it got to the ground, Silva would be pretty a fish out of water against Allen after, seeing what he was able to do with Mooney's. But to be able to take those shots, return them just as hard, and then put him on the ground like he did. Yeah, good for Allen, not great for Silva. Just sort of 2 people passing each other in terms of their velocity or momentum trajectory. Thank you. I knew that was the wrong word as soon as I said it.
Is a physics major. All right. Before that, we had Neil Magny versus Phil Rowe, and heading into fight week, I was like, well, man, both these guys are like the same height and the same build and the same weight, and they're going to be really hard to tell apart. But at least Phil Rowe doesn't have the same haircut. Fuck.
Yeah, exact same.
Phil Rowe just trolling us all by going and getting Neil Magny's exact same braids, and it was hard to tell these dudes apart. Neil Magny, he is one of the hardest dudes.
Yeah, he is.
I mean, I scored the fight for Rowe. I gave him the first and third rounds. Magny ended up winning the split decision. It's actually entirely possible that it was due to the judges having telling him apart.
Yeah,
but mostly it's that. Yeah, I thought Rowe won the first and third rounds, but it's not as though he put a huge stamp on either of them.
Mm-mm.
It's really hard to look great against Neil Magny.
Yep,
that's it. Just, and bless his heart, I'm coming around on Dominic Cruz. Like, I mean, I'm far from the only person to say this, but the usual line on Dominic Cruz is he knows his shit really well, but he makes you enjoy MMA less by watching it just because he's like just so salty all the time. But he made a great point. I believe it was Anik who brought up something that Rowe said, because Magny, of course, now has the most fights and most cage time in the history of the welterweight division. And Rowe said, yeah, I feel like I know everything about Magny's game. I have all this tape to watch. And Dominic Cruz said, so you watched all that tape on Magny and you decided that the way to approach him was to like clinch against the cage with him for 3 rounds.
Yeah, obviously you didn't learn what you should have from a tape study.
Exactly. Like, it's hard to look great against Neil Magny. It is impossible to look great against Neil Magny if you want to spend 3 rounds in Magny world.
If you play his game.
Yeah, like that's what Magny wants. He can strike in space with fighters, but that's also some of the people that have really lit him up. That's where they've done it. Lorenz Larkin, Vicente Luque. But I mean, if you get just sucked into the area between the warning track and the fence and you let him lean on you, even though you're the same height, it's still just you're wearing his weight from like the overhook and collar tie or whatever. And he's just throwing little knees and stomping on your feet. And it's just miserable. It was grueling for me as the viewer.
Yeah.
It was grueling for Rowe. I thought Rowe won the fight, but it going the other way, doesn't feel like a robbery. I don't throw that word around real easy. I was robbed of 15 minutes of my life.
Yeah.
That's about all. Yeah. That's the only robbery that.
Yeah. And Rowe was having success when he was like out in the open cage and like, just using his boxing. But yeah, he just, I think when people beat Magny, it usually shows that, they are, top 5 talent, like anywhere from Jeff Neal and RDA up to Gilbert Burns and Shavkat, and so, while he could have definitely gone the decision there, I don't think it reflects well on Rowe that he wasn't able to sort of put
what do all those people have in common? Because Magny is the ultimate example of a well-rounded fighter.
Yep.
If you're making him in, one of the video games, he's a 6.5 in everything.
Yeah, just down the board.
The people that have really rolled him over have been people who've been great at one thing and have managed to put the fight in that realm.
Yep.
Like Shavkat took him down, Chiesa took him down, RDA took him down.
Gilbert lamped him and then put him down.
Burns and Larkin caught him in space and were just way faster than him and hit harder. Rowe probably could have won this fight more definitively, but didn't. And therefore doesn't really have anyone to blame but himself for losing a splitter. Yeah. Before that, joke is on you, Wellington Turman. Wellington Turman says, I'm going to drop to 170 pounds where, maybe I won't be at such a size disadvantage against dudes I fight. And the UFC was like, well, all right, we will hook you up with Randy Brown. Don't forget to bring a ladder.
McMahon was like, you know what? Fuck this guy.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of what was surprising about this, but you know what? My notes on this are pretty much the same as the Rowe versus Magny fight. I thought Brown was a better fighter. I mean, he's a big favorite for a reason. I think Brown's just a better fighter. He has better physical tools. He has better overall skills. But kind of like Rowe against Magny, Turman didn't do himself any favors here. Brown is very good at striking from distance. He's a tall fighter that's good at fighting an outfight. I mean, he can jab you from halfway across the cage. You pointed out he can hit you with a front kick from all the way across the Monster Energy logo. And the long way, where it's like 8 feet long. But also in the clinch, he does a good job of doing that. The Tim Means clinch thing, where Brown is so tall that he really does make you wear a lot of his weight when you're clinching with him.
Yeah.
He's 3, maybe 4 inches taller than Turman, but when he's got an underhook and an overhook, he's bent over so far that is exhausting.
Yeah, like 20% of his body's just waiting on.
He can knee you in the ribs, the sternum, the cup, which he did pretty easily. Oh, Keith Schillen taking time out of his vacation to come and harass us here.
It's insane. Wild.
Yeah, all I'd say is he didn't win. Turman didn't win. I didn't think he was going to win, but that's just because Brown is a better fighter right now. Brown, I think, is a borderline top 15 guy who has top 10 talent, but isn't as consistent as he could be. But having said that, I liked some of what I saw out of Turman. His actual physical transformation to 170, it wasn't just him sucking out another 15 pounds of water. He had clearly kind of reworked his physique. Yeah. Like his legs looked jacked as hell. His upper body looked a lot leaner. Again, he looked good on the scale, looked good in the cage, had plenty of gas. He wasn't easy to hurt. None of the things that would normally indicate dehydration were present. And he did use his low kicks, I thought, to pretty good effect against Brown, which is something that's always going to be against a guy like
necessary
him.
In a fight like that.
So, I mean, New England's own Wellington Turman maybe, does have a future at 170.
Yeah.
But this was a big ask for your first.
Big.
Yeah. In the literal and figurative senses of the word.
100%.
Let's see. Do we have awards? Tell you what, will you
gotcha.
See if you can find our awards for us? Before that, as Adam looks up the awards, we had a lightweight plus fight between Mateusz Rebecki and Loic Rajabov. Rajabov, of course, missed the non-title limit by like 1.5 pounds. So this took place at a catchweight. And Rajabov did not look good, and Rebecki looked pretty good. I mean, I joked on the prelim with Keith that Rebecki is kind of like I ordered Michael Chandler on Wish, and this is what I got. And that was mostly just due to Rebecki's physique. Like in silhouette, he looks like Michael Chandler, but he did his best Michael Chandler impression here. I mean, he fights out of the opposite stance most of the time, but in terms of like a lot of power punching, kind of seamlessly mixing in takedown attempts and then finishing takedown attempts that a taller, less muscular guy wouldn't have been able to finish. Yeah. It really was kind of like a no, honey, we have Michael Chandler at home type performance. I feel weird saying this about a guy who's on now a 15 or 16 fight win streak in Rebecki, but I still think this was more down to just Rajabov not looking great. I don't know if it had something to do with the missed weight. Maybe he was sick. Maybe he had an injury that I don't know. I'm not making excuses for him. He can find the book of excuses for himself very easily, but whatever it is, he didn't bring much to the cage. He kind of wilted in the face of pressure. When Rebecki wanted to fight in, he was able to get in. When he wanted to fight out, he was able to keep it outside. Took down the bigger Rajabov with ease multiple times.
Mhm.
Yeah, just Rebeski looked great, and we're just left wondering how much of it was due to the man that we never did see a stadium full of people in Tajikistan.
You know, I think that's it, really.
Maybe
That's what it all comes down to.
Like, we've got 3 in the UFC right now, and this guy that misses weight, you know.
Less support, you know.
Yeah, it is.
Poor guy. Yeah, Rebeski did look good, though.
Did you find the awards?
Yes, I did. I got the awards up.
Okay, so we have awards. Specifically, you looked them up on MMA Mania?
I looked up the...
Fired.
Okay, you know what, Keith? Okay, yeah, you know what?
All right, so we got a fight. We got a fight of the night and 2 performances of the night. If it's up on MMA Mania already, then probably all of you have seen it. So rather than guess, throw out what you would have or whom you would have given the awards to, and we'll see if we can get some kind of consensus here. Looking at it, I do not agree with the fight of the night.
Yeah, same here.
I'm definitely good with one of the performances of the night.
Same.
And I actually don't hate those at all. Yeah, I don't like the fight of the night pick, but yeah, I'll get yours. Get your awards in here. Whom you would have given the fight of the night and the performances of the night to, and we'll get some of them up on the screen or get them read out here.
Yeah, if we're only giving 50K to 4 people, it's not. I think I don't know what people's fight of the nights was going to be, but I'm interested to talk about who it should have gone to. I think.
Okay, well, Marcus Mustard says his performances of the night would go to David Onama and Macy Barber. Okay, I would actually say the same. Your fight of the night went to your main event, Josh Emmett versus Ilia Topuria. That's the one that I'm having a hard time getting on board with. Just, it wasn't very competitive. One of the judges gave it 50-42, which, while I disagree with it, is an indication of kind of how the fight felt as it was going on. Fight of the night, Mariscal versus Peak. I like that.
I like that as well.
And hell, I like Ahibas versus Barber as well.
I don't mind that either.
I thought that was a fight with lots of, kind of back and forth action, swings and momentum.
Yeah.
Pretty high level stuff going on. It's one where Barber looked great, and it's not because Ahibas looked terrible. It's just because she leveled up. Yeah, I mean, J-Sex, Emmett versus Topuria wasn't even in my top 3 fights of the night. I agree. Well, I don't know. It might have been. I mean, hell, even Turman versus Brown, I thought was a more interesting fight than the main event. Like, there are some 5-round fights that are super one-sided and are exciting nonetheless. Like, I always think of Holloway versus Poirier. They all involve
Holloway
versus Poirier, Holloway versus Ortega, or hell,
Holloway, Rodriguez, Cater,
Volkanovski versus Ortega.
Yeah,
there are one-sided fights that can still be exciting just because you see the toughness on display. The losing fighter is in it round to round, even if they're losing those rounds. This was just a fight. The most interesting thing about this, when we're talking about either of these guys a year from now, will be, oh man, that was the first time Topuria really put it on like a top 5 guy. And we'll look at it as a step on Topuria's, path to wherever he is a year from now. But it's not going to make anyone's fight of the year list. It's not going to make anyone's fight of the month list. It's like, it was just a beating.
Yeah. And I'm always a fan of giving fight of the night bonuses to people lower down on the card. Just sort of,
it's life-changing money.
Yeah.
Josh Van was making probably $1,200 and $1,200, and Fury, and I'm not laughing at that. Like, Fury pays well for what but I'm saying, like, Josh Van probably made like under $4,000 for his last fight. Give that man 50K.
Yeah. Incentivize your fighters on your undercard to keep it exciting. And, obviously, like, main eventers deserve bonuses just as much as people on the undercard. But if you're putting, 2 fighters in a main event, you're expecting the fight to be action-packed, interesting. And while, I'll just reiterate that a fight like, Peak versus Mariscal, or even Jenkins Emmers was pretty exciting. Same with Barber, Ribas. I'll be okay with that. I think that, a fight that was much more competitive to two fighters who, aren't walking out to as much praise as our two main eventers. Definitely deserve some reward for that.
John Butterfield says, doesn't think Mariscal versus Peak was high level or anything, but you reward those guys for going all in on a very entertaining bout. Well, of course. I mean, that's what Fight of the Night is in a lot of cases. How many Fight of the Night awards do people like Clay Guida and Diego Sanchez have?
Mm-hmm.
That, it was like the fight was two cats in a sack. It wasn't. It's still an entertainment industry.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And you want to reward fighters who keep your like the really poorly made up undercards like interesting, and keep people from just tuning in for your last 3 fights of the night.
Absolutely. Next fight down the card, we had the Tabitha Ricci versus Jillian Robertson in a strawweight contest. On a night that I didn't have the best night picking fights, but I had a pretty decent night of just predicting what they would look like. This fight looked exactly like I thought. I'm glad that Jillian Robertson is in the UFC. Like I enjoy watching her fight, win or lose, but the problems she had at 125 were not going to be solved by moving down. Her problems are her striking is super ugly and awkward, and she is a very good grappler who lacks the wrestling to get the fight to the ground when she wants, where she wants, in the position she wants. I called her on the preview kind of the poor woman's Mackenzie Dern. And those problems in Robertson's game are not going to be fixed by going down to 115. Instead, she gets someone even faster than she's used to in Ricci. She's not as high level, but Ricci, in terms of being smaller but being so much faster that she just was kind of effortlessly able to land on her on the feet, reminded me of Tisha Torres. Where
100%.
She's just way smaller. Ricci looked a full weight class smaller than Robertson. Just Robertson's head was bigger, her shoulders were broader. Even though Ricci is compact and powerful, like Robertson's legs were thicker. But Ricci just blinding speed difference.
Way quicker.
Robertson, her attempts to bring Ricci to the ground were not good. And honestly, if Ricci had conceded the takedowns, I don't think Robertson would have liked what she had bought for herself. Ricci's a very good ground fighter, and unlike Robertson, who mostly is kind of hanging out, waiting for a mistake, looking to isolate a leg or an arm, Ricci throws hammer fists and elbows and just makes things miserable on the ground.
Yeah, much nastier.
I thought Ricci won all 3 rounds, and
same.
Yeah, I mean, Robertson is still well above 500 in the UFC. I mean, she's not going to be on my cut list tonight.
If there's any fighter though who it would pay dividends to invest in training in wrestling, both for like the making their striking work together better, and obviously actually allowing them to make use of their ground game, Robertson is very high up that list.
She is, and she's not old, and there is time to remedy those things if she wants to. I mean, it's not like she's at a bad camp. She's at American Top Team. Whatever is bad about your game, American Top Team can fix it if it can be fixed.
Yeah.
But having said that, trying to picture a Charles Oliveira or Fabricio Verdum type reinvention out of her, I don't see it in the cards right now.
Yeah.
She's a limited fighter. That's the best way to put it. She's not a bad fighter. She's just a limited fighter. And Ricci was a bad matchup for those limitations. And Ricci's on a pretty good win streak herself, but I don't know about you. I didn't see anything that makes me go, okay, we need to see her against like Wei Li Zhang.
Yeah, Amanda Lemos or up in the top 5. Yeah, just sort of it was just all right. And yeah, like you were saying, I mean, it's pretty obvious watching Jillian Robertson fights that you just need to be better at wrestling, and if that's such an obvious observation and it's not improving over time, then it is just sort of shows like just a sort of a limitation. But not bad.
There's no more putting it off any further as the unluckiest man in MMA, Jalgas Zhumagulov, 1-5 in the UFC, enters the cage as a favorite against Josh Van. I picked Zhumagulov in this one. And
that was your mistake.
It was my mistake. And I don't know if it was just me continuing to overestimate Jalga Shumagalov and give him too much slack and give him too much credit, or it was just me overcompensating, trying not to make homer picks, because Josh Van is, of course, a 4-ounce Fight Club guy. He's a Houston guy. All of his fights before tonight have been in Fury Fighting Championship, kind of my, well, Fury,
yeah,
you know, my hometown promotion. I mean, I've seen at least half of them in person. And I just thought he's a really good prospect, that this might be a year too soon. But Josh Van Morrison, yeah.
I mean, put on a great performance. You know, just was just faster to the punch on a lot. You know, showed great power, showed good cardio for coming in on 9 days notice or however it was. And I mean, just Zhumagulov is just such an interesting fighter in that division. It's in a division with so many with kind of a base level where everyone is well rounded because it's flyweight. Having somebody who's more dynamic, who has more power, like Van or other people who've had success, it definitely favors that. I thought Zhumagulov would win coming into this, just not knowing who Van was, knowing that Zhumagulov has been. He could either be 1-6 now, or he could be 4-3. On like the flip of a dime. But no, Van showed good things both for his position in the division, as well as coming out on short notice, just very impressive.
And I have figured out, because what I've said before is Zhumagulov is at least good at everything and has just been matched really hard and had some unlucky split decisions. I mean, he's had 3 split decision losses in a row. That's got to be a record. We'll have Petri working on that one for us. He's at least tied for the all-time record, split decision losses in the UFC. But no, he's not great at everything. He's slow for 125. Van is fast, but he made Zhumagulov look like he was fighting in mud. Van was bouncing in, landing like a jab and a right cross, bouncing back out, and Zhumagulov was like swinging through air behind him. Just made the guy look clumsy. It doesn't help that Zhumagulov's hair just bounces like crazy anytime he gets hit. Some fighters make it work to their advantage. Like, it always made Clay Guida look like the shit he was doing was cooler than it was. With Zhumagulov, like, it looks like a wig. It looks like he's wearing it to try to fool like the Scooby-Doo gang. It's like Van's just gonna rip that shit off, and it's like, well, it would have worked too if not for you meddling kids. Much as I hate to say this, and we're gonna get to the cut list soon, but J-Sex, Jaddy the baddie. All I want to do is zoom. He got wrecked in effect tonight. I would make a bunch of Van Morrison references for Marcus Mustard, but I already get accused of being too much of a dad on this show. So let's instead move on to Trevor Peek. I will move out of my Gen X references, and I'll move into like a millennial reference. I've said it a few times. Trevor Peek is what it would sound like if there was a can of Skull on Aqua Teen Hunger Force. It's like a recurring character. Taking on short notice, Jose Mariscal, and Mariscal beats Peek 3-0. Looks fantastic doing it. I mean, here's a guy. Jose Mariscal is a pretty high-level regional featherweight, steps in on short notice, up a weight class, and regardless, even if Peek had won, even if Peek had just hit him with a haymaker late and knocked him out, all the shine off Peek as a formerly undefeated prospect is off, because his takedown defense was so porous. Mariscal was hitting like lateral drops, like whizzer kick type stuff, just throwing them around really with hip throws and trips effortlessly. The problem was how anytime Mariscal didn't like the taste of what he was getting on the feet, he could just get an overhook and instantly dump Peek on the ground and land in side control. For
being a significantly smaller fighter than Peek.
Peek throwing punches like they're Hadoukens. Shout out to Nick Diaz, who referred to Takanori Gomi as hitting him with some little Hadouken punch. But yeah, Peek, I said this about Josh Emmett, but you know what? Compared to how Trevor Peek was overthrowing his punches, like Emmett might as well have been, prime Pernell Whitaker or something. Just
right. Peek was throwing to the right hand and then just swinging the fist back, like to try to land anything on Mariscal at the end of that fight. Absolutely wild.
Yeah, he wasn't rechambering his punches so much as like reeling them back in.
Just hoping that anything would connect.
So I don't know what happens with Jose Mariscal from here. I'll be honest, even having seen a lot of his fights on the regional scene, he's not a guy that was like on my whiteboard, like, this dude that's 13-6 in LFA, watch out for him on the Contender Series next fall. No, it's like, he's just another dude. And you know what? It's more of a thing of, if someone comes to the UFC and I see they beat Jose Mariscal, I'm like, okay, this guy might actually have some skills. But he showed up, handed Trevor Peek his first loss, and looked great doing it. I don't. Any other thoughts about this one?
Saved the fight, put on a good one, but at least wrote his name a little bit into this year's sort of history book. But yeah, all in all, good performance from Mariscal.
For that, Jamal Emmers versus Jack Jenkins, the Australian mullet versus Emmers takes
split decision.
Well, no, Emmers should have won the decision.
Oh, yes,
Jenkins takes the split decision. If you're in the chat right now, tell us how you scored Emmers versus Jenkins. Bob Chimpson. Bob Chimpson is up in here, and you guys know me, and Bob Chimpson, you specifically know me because you called some fights, robberies before that Keith and I weren't ready to slap that stamp on. But here, I gave all 3 rounds to Emmers, and at least one judge gave all 3 rounds to Jenkins. And I don't get it, man.
Yeah.
Like, we had rounds where Emmers outstruck Jenkins badly. We had rounds where Emmers took Jenkins down and controlled him and moved to dominant positions for like much of the round and was, again, doing damage and threatening to frame up submissions. It's hard for me to justify scoring 2 of those rounds for Jack Jenkins. It's the best I can say. John Butterfield, easy 29-28 Emmers. If that's it, if you want to give Jenkins the first round, I am on board with that. But
it's really an interesting sort of reflection on just like the kind of how these judges are scoring in their minds, where we had rounds where Emmers clearly outstruck and damaged Jenkins more, which definitely should go to him. And then some rounds where I think one or two of the rounds were pretty close, at least in the stand up, before Emmers took over pretty significantly on the ground in the latter half of the round. And if you think that Jenkins might have done a little bit more damage before it hit the mat, and then you sort of ride that over, I mean, that's just a reflection on how these rounds are scored and how they should be scored. But I think Emmers, a 30-27, I scored a 29-28, but I think a 30-27 would make more sense than anything else. Of my second option.
Same here. And the unfortunate thing, the thing that extra sucks about this for Emmers is, of course, a pinnacle MMA guy. He's a primary sparring partner of Bobby Green. So if you don't know better and you think Emmers is like Green, you're like, oh, he lost the split decision to Jack Jenkins. I bet he was just goofing off and like throwing 6 strikes around and like bobbing and weaving. It's like, no, he did everything right. He was supposed to win and just got hosed by the judges. It is a tale as old as time. That's just some bullshit, man. Unfortunate. So to those in the chat screaming robbery, whether you lost money on this or just you are interested in defending the cause of righteousness and proper judging, I'm on board with you. This was bad.
Yeah.
Speaking of bad, Cedric Dumas is
crimes.
A bad person. There's no robbery in the card opener between Cody Brundage and Cedric Dumas, and
a few other things.
But even better, there was no domestic violence or pistol whipping of bystanders in restaurants. Brundage steps in on short notice here. This was supposed to be Dumas versus Puna Soriano, and even leaving aside that it was a late notice thing, I thought Brundage might be a tougher test for Dumas than Soriano, because Soriano is as much of a throwback, just scrap Hawaiian fighter as there is in the UFC right now. Whereas Brundage, he comes out standing like a karate fighter, but he is a good wrestler and is willing to wrestle. And I thought he could test what is obviously the most untested part of Dumas's game. But you know what? Leaving aside that I don't think Dumas should be in the violence business until he gets his legal shit sorted out, he looked good in the cage.
Yeah.
Brundage took him down, and he got right back up. In the time that they were on the feet, Dumas was definitely faster, sharper. Brundage was confused and frustrated. Only thing I'll throw out here is, and it's definitely going to make an appearance later in this show, Brundage's first takedown attempt, it's kind of in the balance, and then Brundage just decides to slap on a guillotine and fall to his back. Like,
yeah.
It is the women's MMA headlock throw of men's MMA.
Jumping on the guillotine.
Just jumping on the guillotine. It doesn't work on 2020s level UFC fighters. Apparently, even Cedric Dumas apparently. And if it doesn't work, you've probably just thrown away that round, if not the fight. And sure enough, Brundage lost that round. And on my scorecard, I think he lost both of the others as well. Just a poor showing by him, and Dumas showing that he at least has enough that he belongs fighting kind of that bottom tier in one of the UFC's thinner divisions right now. That's it. That is all. What is it? 13 fights that ended up making it through the gate. We lost Tatsuro Taira, of course, but yeah, I think
the fight I was looking forward to the most besides the main event.
Oh yeah, like Tatsuro Taira was the reason you check in for this, but it was not to be. That's all 13 fights. Let's get to some of the fun stuff. Do you, Adam, have anybody on your cut list?
I have a few people on my cut list in sort of, I guess I'll say ascending order in terms of how seriously I have them on my cut list. I'll start from I said ascending, but I'll start from the one I think is most okay to cut. I think that his wives miss him, and I think that he needs to go reevaluate some things about his game. And so I think that our boy ZZ Top might need to go back to the drawing board outside of the UFC. I'm giving the UFC free reign to cut Zhaglas Zhumagulov.
Did you ever see the movie The Dark Crystal?
Yes, I have. Yeah.
I wonder if the problem is that he has two wives and they're just draining all of his essence out of him. I mean, he even looks like one of those podling. Like maybe he's just at home and his eyes are just like blank white. He's like, maybe he just gets rid of one of the wives, and his T levels go back to normal.
It's entirely possible.
Yeah, he comes back up like a foot taller and like he's a welterweight now. But
mythical fighter
Zhalgas
is divorced Zhumagulov.
Who has twice as many wives as UFC wins, probably needs to go back. Damn. Got anyone else?
Yeah. So let's see. I got so just off of like performance and sort of momentum and stuff like that. I'd put Turman on there. But like I had said, while I think Turman has had a rough spot of it, I think he's made a change going down to 170. He seemed to look good, at least in the movement down to 170, and then perhaps that, and then beyond that, getting a tough test like Randy Brown out the gate. I think while he's not looking good, I do think that the UFC should give him perhaps one more chance to see if he's UFC material. And then even further, same thing with Cody Brundage. I mean, I think Cody is 3-1 in his last 4. He's on a 3-fight loss streak. 2 of those have been finishes. One of those has been losing to Cedric Dumas. And it's an interesting thing for me because I don't know what you think about him being on the cut list, but Marshall, I'll ask that first. Would you put Brundage on your cut list as well?
Yeah, Brundage would be on my cut list. Losing to Michal Oleksiejczuk has aged pretty well. Losing to Rodolfo Vieira is not a problem. Losing to Cedric Dumas, the only thing that I would give him a pass for is that he did step up on short notice. The UFC usually won't cut a fighter who did them a solid that way.
Yeah.
So I would be fine with the UFC giving him one more try, but he is on the thinnest of ice.
Yeah, for sure.
This should have been a winnable fight, and he was never really
competitive.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. The only thing that I would say that holds him on is just that the idea of not wanting to, cut someone who sort of fixed your card a little bit, and not wanting to disincentivize fighters to step up on short notice for fear of being, sort of judged the same way they would if they had a full camp going into a fight. But
exactly, like even if the UFC doesn't feel they owe anything to that fighter in particular, the last thing they want is nobody willing to step up next time they need a short notice replacement. Completely agreed.
So really just maybe just ZZ is on my list for people who are kind of a definite cut. A few people didn't look great, but nobody is everybody sort of skidded by on the test.
J-Sex cutting Austin Lane off of a no contest in 30 seconds. I absolutely love it.
The less unranked heavyweights we have, the fewer unranked heavyweight slobber knockers we can have.
Right. Won't anybody think of the slobber?
Oh man.
Let's get to more fun stuff.
Yeah.
Bulls and the Bears.
Yeah.
You want to go positive or negative first?
I'm feeling negative. Let's start with that.
I can tell you're feeling negative. All right. You want to go first? You want me to go first?
You got it.
Okay. Negatives. Bull or Bears. Amanda Ribas. Coming into this fight had been very, very competitive at 115 as well as 125 pounds, and had been extremely hard to hurt and or finish. Like except with a few exceptions, like Marina Rodriguez, for example. Even the women who had beaten Amanda Ribas, it had been decisions that maybe Ribas should have won. It had been really competitive fights, but here, Barbara just had an answer for everything, was hurting Ribas badly, and it was so out of the ordinary compared to what I'm used to from Ribas that I didn't believe she was really in trouble until the thing was almost over.
Yep.
I was like, yeah, she's bloodied, but she's going to get up smiling and win a split decision and go back to her adorable animal shelter. But no, a combination of Barbara looking great and Ribas just running into a buzzsaw. Bad night at the office for Amanda Ribas, and she's in a division where that shot to a title shot may not be so easy for much longer. And so I think this was a bad loss at a bad time for Amanda Ribas. I think we're going to look maybe a year from now, another fight or two for each of these women as a fork in the road where Barbara made a positive career move. And for Ribas, this will be a tough one to bounce back from.
Yeah, for sure.
Next one, Wellington Turman. I liked the idea behind it. I'm not normally in favor of dropping in weight as a cure-all for any fighter's problems. But if you're kind of undersized and you're young, you're not like a 34-year-old trying to squeeze one last tiny bit of juice out of his career. I'm in favor of it. And Turman it didn't work tonight.
Yeah.
Part of it's the matchup. Brown is a better fighter. Brown is much bigger. And part of it is just that Turman didn't fight to his own best advantage. Bad night at the office. Worst night of anybody. Jokes about everyone else aside, I'm going to say Loic Rajabov to blow weight, look terrible, and get finished. That's a bad night at the office, ending up on someone else's highlight reel. So those are my Bears. What do you got?
Trying to, I guess, analyze people who aren't on your list. I think that I had Turman on mine as well. And for all the same reasons you put out. I also, a lot of people had just like very slight declines in their stocks. I put Bruno Silva on my Bears list. He had maybe it was still up in the air after he knocked out Brad Tavares. Like, okay, well, he didn't look good against Gerald Meerschaert, but he did survive against Pereira, which is one thing. And then he had a great streak before, like entering into the UFC. But after landing his best shots on Brendan Allen, a guy, close in the rankings to him and not being able to deliver. I think that's a pretty big bear. And I think, while he might still be exciting, fighting, unranked middleweights, I don't think that he has a very good future in the UFC, especially in the top 15. But besides that, I think Philip Rowe, coming off of 3 knockout wins, using his height and reach to his advantage. And sleeping a bunch of people. While I think he definitely could have won the decision against Neil Magny, I think the fact that he especially after espousing how much study he did, still playing into Magny's game, did sort of show that, he's maybe not top 10 talent in the UFC, but we'll have to see about him. But those are my biggest ones. Maybe Josh Emmett to a certain degree, showed a lot of heart out there, but his looking at this now, it seems like that Yair Rodriguez fight was sort of his chance to be to really stamp his name, and it looks like it's only downhill from here for him.
Sounds good to me. Bulls, people whose stock is up after tonight's fights.
Starting off with my lowest of my bowl, is two of our three short notice replacements in sort of Mariscal and Vaughn. I think they both showed really good performances coming in on short notice. Brundage unfortunately couldn't join them in that streak. It kind of ruins my little thing I got going on here, but they both did well. Although I'd say my best bowls were our two, headliners of Macy Barber and Topuria, or our co-headliners. They, both had great performances against the best competition up until that point, and just show that they are in both of their respective divisions, sort of, what's up next.
I agree with all of yours. So rather than repeat any of them, I'll just add one more to the pile.
Mm-hmm.
Brendan Allen, he was a favorite, but continuing kind of, again, he didn't need a redemption story, but just kind of restoring faith that, hey, he still might be a future contender at 185 or even 205, whatever it ends up being. I mean, part of his whole thing is he's kind of a big dude. So he's someone that we could see filling out and maybe being at light heavyweight. But yeah, other than that, I agree with all of yours. Any dude seriously?
And, I put him, I sort of put him, very, very sort of ad hoc on my Bears list because I wanted to add someone else. But, we mentioned it. Dominic Cruz mentioned it. But my dude seriously is going to go to Philip Rowe. Says you analyze all of Neil Magny's extensive career in the UFC. You know that he loves to put you in the clinch and loves to just beat you up from there. You saw just the fight before how the attributes of a 6'3" welterweight can be very advantageous. Obviously, Neil Magny is not the same as Wellington Turman, but the blueprint was there, and it was there right before you came out to your walkout song. And so, dude, seriously, Philip Rowe, don't play Magny's game, or else you'll likely to lose a decision.
Completely agree with that one. I'll throw on one that I already mentioned, Cody Brundage. Like in the first 2 minutes of the fight, just going for the low percentage guillotine. And on the one hand, yeah, Dumas is one of the people in that division it would probably be most likely to work on. He's a tall guy with a long, skinny neck that's very unproven on the ground, but it didn't work. You lost that round, and then you lost the rest of the rounds. Yikes. I will add, I'm pretty sure it was Dan Murgliata, the ref in the Justin Tafa Austin Lane fight. So we had that absolutely gruesome, like bowling ball grip, Three Stooges eye gouge. Tafa was clearly done.
Yeah.
Like the replay shows Austin Lane's fingers like reaching back into Tafa's childhood memories and like smearing the icing on his 6th birthday cake, like across his medulla oblongata. And so we're giving the man like 4 minutes to recover from like a 29-second fight. And I remember Tafa standing there and just blood running down from his eyes down his face.
A little Exorcist
victim. Yeah, the Exorcist, or like one of the dudes that opened the wrong grail at the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Well, that was Emmett, actually. The whole face melting off kind of thing. But like he looked like he had just seen like an Eldritch God. I mean, like he looks like, I don't know. And yeah, like we said, the timeout was like 6 times longer than the actual fight was. And yeah.
Eric Nixick, who, as far as I'm concerned, should be in the running for Coach of the Year every year. Get that dude to the hospital.
I was watching his eyes start to swell out, and he's going to lose his retina if you do not get him out of that cage now. I was like, the last thing he needs is to have Austin Lane go around like kicking him in the like, yeah.
Like the last thing that man ever saw was like Austin Lane's like third knuckle.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Letter grade for the whole card. Again, keeping in mind that we're judging this by the standards of a free TV card.
Yep. Similar to my grades in school and my classes in school, they start off relatively strong, sort of plummet towards the middle, and then at the very end, I'm able to pick it up. I think this card was very much the same. I think, sitting down at 10:30 in the morning to start some fights, watching, Jamal Emmers, Jenkins, Peak, Mariscal, I was like, okay, these are some good fights. It definitely helped get it out the gate well. And then we had a dry spell between Tabitha Ritchie and I'd say maybe like the main card, really. But after all is said and done, I'm giving it a C+.
C+. Okay. Kudos to JSX for the excellent Event Horizon reference. I'm always here for those. One of these times, I'll tell you guys the story of why I've been more scared at that movie than any other movie I've seen in my life. Scott McCrate, one of our true OGs, gives it a C+ as well. Rest of the crew, a little more forgiving. John Butterfield is like, the sun was still shining over England.
So he's just happy that it was at a good time.
Dev's like, it was right around wake and bake time on the west coast of the U.S. Keith, but not Keith Schillen, gives it a B-.
Yeah, B- is I'm good with B-.
Live crowd and early start, solid B. I'm closer to you. I'm thinking C+, B-, just because one of the best fights dropped off before it even made it to the cage.
Damn.
The heavyweight slobber knocker slopped very literal slobber and lots of like eye guts,
eye blood.
And I mean, while the main and co-main events were both very decisive, at least we didn't get any weird controversy or fouls.
Yeah,
they were just they were what they were. Yeah, just another card. Welcome to the UFC, Josh Fan. Big ups to Houston always.
Yeah.
Our listener of the night.
Oh.
I mean, this is the thing that you would be in the running for if you ever didn't tap out like 10 minutes into the show.
I get extreme, I mean, I feel bad for our any European listener, but when those fights end up at 1:30 in the morning, I do.
If Keith Schillen were here, he would say it's their fault for living in the third world.
Oh, dude, I love that Keith came in just for half a second, just to berate us for a second, and then he left. But I'm gonna have to give listener of the night.
While you're thinking of it, Marcus Mustard actually in here early, often dropping bombs left and right. Dev doing work. Bob Chimpson, you know what, Bob? I don't always agree with you when you're in here, though. I always value your opinions and love to see you here. But you called robbery. I'm here. I'm with you.
Yeah.
You are my listener of the night.
JSX, you're getting the second listener of the night. Loved your comments. Very funny. Awesome. Listener of the Dev was hyping me up in the comments. So I'll take it.
Adam is the talker of the night. Don't give him more awards than he needs. That's it. The Sherdog Radio Network live recap of UFC on ABC 5, Emmett versus Topuria, UFC Jacksonville. I've been your host, Ben Duffy. He's been your substitute co-host, Adam Duffy. Thank you for listening. The preview for UFC on ESPN 48 or whatever the hell the next one is called should be up first thing Monday morning. Keith will still be on vacation, so Mr. Lev Pisarski will be joining me for that one. Oh yeah, it's UFC on ESPN 48, Strickland versus Magomedov. I think that's UFC Vegas 76 or something.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, be here for that one because there's a bunch of weird shit on that one.
Yep.
Between now and then, thank you guys very much for checking it out. Have a good rest of your evening. If it's light out where you are, go and enjoy it.
Yeah. Have a good night.